Welcome to Tesseract Podcast, where we unlock your power to innovate. Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm going to be your host today. Tesseract's mission is to empower airmen, connect them to resources, and accelerate change across the Air Force logistics enterprise. Specifically, our team works as an innovation accelerator assigned to the Air Staff Logistics Directorate, where we partner with airmen to operationalize the new sustainment strategy. In this episode, we talked with Major Chip Litchfield. Chip is an LRO, a commander, and the very first Tesseract to LNO. In this episode, we talk a lot about MICAP Prime and the big win of cementing it into policy. But more importantly, we talk about what it takes to dent the universe and truly create change in the bureaucracy. All right, here we go. The only time of year that I ever say go Pokes is when I'm talking to you and when the Pokes win, and you guys won this year. So
we won this year, and then
you have bragging rights. You have bragging rights for the next 365 days.
We did something against Baylor the 2 weeks following that we won't discuss, but yeah. It's good. It's always good to see a fellow Oklahomie. I'll just say that.
Yeah. There are new career developments for you since we last spoke on the record. Yep. So you've been at DM, taking command.
Yes.
And also you are a Lieutenant Colonel Select, which is really exciting.
Yes. If I can be a Lieutenant Colonel Select Squadron Commander, anybody can be a Lieutenant Colonel Select Squadron Commander. So if it is your aspiration, if you are randomly listening to this as a young supply troop or a young command post troop such as me or a young officer, hold me up as if this guy can do it, boy howdy, I can do it also. But yes, the commander of the 355th Logistics Readiness Squadron out here at DM, busy base, multiple MDS, large squadron, new and interesting things all the time, and taking nothing away from my peers that are squadron commanders at similar bases. It's just I had not heard Davis Monthan ballyhooed about in the same vein as a Kadena or a Nellis in terms of pace, but this place is frighteningly busy.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of people deploying, thousands of people coming back, IRF taskings, the rescue squadrons going out to and fro, and it's that adage about command not being a marathon or a sprint, but rather a sprint marathon has proven to be absolutely true. So, but I appreciate the opportunity, I appreciate the honor. Phenomenal teammates out here, both within the squadron and then out running other squadrons and working in other squadrons too. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know you're crushing it. Anywhere you go, you're going to be crushing it. You know what my favorite credential of yours is, though? That you are the very first Tesseract LNO.
Yeah, I put that on my OPR because that meant something to me too. And it continues to do so. I know Tesseract has very much so rounded out their LNO network, and people are always coming and going with new projects and projects hitting a conclusion point, and then other people just being interested in saying, "Hey, how can I help it?" There is a sense of pride in that. Hey, I've got a project. Here's data. Here's my pitch. Take it and do something with it. Right? Yeah, there is some pride associated with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll never forget the story of you. I mean, obviously, like I wasn't there, but you jumping on the blue line, right? And and giving your pitch on MICAP Prime, and directly to Major General Hurry, right? Or Brigadier General Hurry at the time. And also the other stories behind, meeting in the basement of the Pentagon with Garrett, talking through all of the, the ideas and the aspirations and the details of MICAP Prime, and even naming
Yep.
MICAP Prime, right? Based off of his experience at at Amazon. It's like, oh yeah, MICAP Prime sounds like an awesome name. Like all of those stories resonate with me with the the tales of entrepreneurship in the Air Force, and I think you are a showcase example of what an airman with the time, with the information, with the passion, can discover and do. So I know, I look up to you, personally, and I know airmen around you, especially now in your command, look up to you and what you're capable of.
I appreciate that a lot, and it means a lot coming from you. Um, but you got to shoot at some point. You got to shoot your shot, right? Um, I'm fond of sports analogies, uh, and people always say, seize an opportunity, take advantage of an opportunity, and everything like that, right? I'm a baseball guy. I love baseball, but they say, the batter up in the bottom of the ninth with the bases loaded, down by 3 runs. Life goal right there in that moment in time, your job would be to hit a grand slam, right? But that's not seizing an opportunity. That's You're literally at the plate to do what your baseball team pays you to do, right? And that's to get a hit, keep the inning going, put a ball out of the park. That's not that's not seizing an opportunity, if you will. My old group commander, Colonel Mike Borders, says that seizing an opportunity is walking down a city street with a bat on your shoulder, turning around, and there's a ball right there, and you hit it. Like, you're prepared because you have a bat. You don't know where the ball is going to be, but when you see the ball, you hit it. And I've been thinking about that. I've been talking to Garrett about it a long time, and in that, on the blue line right there was an opportunity to just pitch something that I was passionate about, that I was knowledgeable about, but not just say, hey, there's, like a lot of people that have good ideas, but there was an opportunity to immediately fill in the backstory, right? To respond with background details and stuff like that.
Hmm.
In that moment, on the blue line, it was just I could pitch, I could give the 45-second elevator pitch, and a lot of people are able to give a pitch, right? But what happens when your 45-second elevator pitch becomes a 6 or 7 minute walk and train ride, where you really have an opportunity, and a focused opportunity with a senior leader to I hate the word sell, but maybe it is just to pitch your idea, pitch your opportunity, right? Airman led
Hmm.
initiatives, um, and have an encompassing conversation. And that's what that day, and whenever it was that Garrett and I were coming back from the Mitchell Institute, uh, heading towards the Pentagon. That's what we did. So, unique opportunity, and a memory that I won't forget. Right.
Hmm. And then taking that story and thinking about how airmen can replicate that success. And I forgot if we talked about this in the first episode that we did together, but thinking about how airmen can take advantage of a 5 to 6 to 7 minute, however many minutes it is, might even be just that 45 seconds, with their commander, with their wing commander. Um, it doesn't just have to be relegated to, a general officer, right? An
Oh, sure,
idea that,
sure.
yeah, yeah. So just keeping in perspective for, for people listening out there, it is, um, uh, it is important if you're an airman innovator out there that you have that pitch down to that 45 seconds, right? Because an elevator pitch is important.
Sure.
But also cherish those minutes that you get with those key stakeholders that you might have just randomly, bumped shoulders in at the BX, or you had an opportunity to attend a meeting. So I think those are, that's an amazing story, Chip, and sentiment that I think people should carry with them.
Right. And if you get an audience with somebody of particular importance to you, whether that person is in your chain of command or geez, wherever, 45-second elevator pitch is one thing, right? But you're not going to get to the second and third order questions in 45 seconds. That's why it's a 45-second elevator pitch. At some point, you are going to have to answer the second and third order questions, especially on an innovative, approach or offering or idea to fundamentally dent your universe, if you will. Someone is going to ask you the hard questions. And the graveyard of good ideas, if you will, is full of people that couldn't go from the 45-second elevator pitch to the 5-minute off the cuff, but not off the cuff because you've been thinking about it and preparing for it. That 5-minute presentation where a senior leader says, okay, great. Well, how do I pay for that? And then it's just gone. Or what's the total cost of this? Or how does this impact Twicket? Or does this affect other supply requisitions, right? Or does this thing that you want to wear on your body to keep you cool, is it compatible with, this piece of equipment that we also have to wear? And if you haven't thought about those things, I'm not throwing stones, but your good idea is not going to go very far, because that's the friction point. That's where the rubber meets the road. Because if we had unlimited resources and unlimited time, every good idea would be implemented. But the Air Force is optimization at its purest sense. Like, if I need the max good for the least amount of dollars, for the least amount of input, for the most amount of control that we can get, for the least amount of timeline necessary, and everything like that. And the Air Force and Air Force leadership is constantly trying to optimize all those things right there. And if you haven't considered some of those categories that the Air Force is looking to optimize, especially time and resources, then the conversation doesn't go very far.
Yeah, those are all key requirements and perspectives to maintain. Knowing that, when we look at just our airframes alone, I mean, they're from the 60s, they're from the 70s, they're from the 80s. Not all of them are that old, but I mean, this is the oldest fleet health we've ever had. Not to go down a rabbit hole of this, but that's just a testament to optimization, right? We can't buy aircraft every decade, but we can keep the same aircraft and, maintain a certain level of flying hours and maintenance and sustainment on those airframes to get the most out of them.
100%.
So yeah,
because if budget wasn't an option or a thing that we had to optimize or even consider, we would have new weapon systems constantly in the queue. Right? We would be on to 6th or 7th generation, whatever that looks like. But budget is a thing.
That's like space fighters, right?
And
7th or 8th.
Sharks with lasers.
Yeah, right. Sharknado, right? So let's bring the conversation back to MICAP Prime.
Sure.
And we have some recent wins from MICAP Prime that have just come to fruition, which I think are pretty awesome. You want to talk about those?
So we took a big first step, right? Any time that you pitch an idea, there's something policy related that can be tied to your initiative, right? There's, from, again, MICAP Prime, there's supply policy, there's transportation policy, there's DLA supply policy, there's system policy for how the squeaks and beeps and the ones and zeros matriculate through the system, everything. Policy just guides everything, right? And very early on, when I'm pitching MICAP Prime, it's what is the policy? And Garrett was especially good, and Kelsey too, just especially good at where do we attack policy to be able to make this thing happen. And I was able to answer some of those questions and say this is what I would want from a policy perspective, right? So recently we got some policy wins. We're adding some paragraphs to AFI 24602 Volume 2, the transportation TMO AFI. And I've got it up on my screen right here. It says we're going to add paragraph 2.4.1.1. N1A MICAP shipments with N1A as a required delivery date are deemed by the service as mission critical assets, and cost should not be a factor when selecting the method of transportation. To the maximum extent possible, N1A MICAPs should be moved by next day air or the fastest, most reliable method. All N1A MICAPs must be accompanied by a DB form 1348-1A and have a valid text. So, yes.
So this ties in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please. Ask.
So I think this connects beautifully to what we were just talking about with optimization.
Right.
And we're talking about, we talk about efficiency and we talk about effectiveness. And looking at this as a step in the right direction for the Air Force to spend, they're spending more resources on the front end here in order to generate impact and lethality on the back end, right? In aircraft. And it really, I think it signifies that there is an understanding of this and this type of expenditure, this type of this investment in this resource. But obviously you're the expert. Those are just the thoughts that are at the top of my head right now. It's just how we can, connecting the dots between just kind of the rabbit hole we were in before to what we're talking about now.
Yeah. So I would, you honor me with your comment about being the expert, but I'm not the expert anymore. I still think about it quite a lot. The command has kind of taken the day, right? And I haven't been able to work on this as consistently I had as I was doing my time in DC. So I'll tell you right now that the likes of Major Tyner Hill, Major Joe Mercurio, the scout commanders, those are the experts right now, because those are the ones that are constantly engaging and pushing MICAPs and working in that mesh point that is the space between supply and transportation, material management and transportation. Both my parents were supply troops, so it's I've been saying supply my whole life. So my material managers, I don't mean any disrespect by that. So that friction point between material management and supply, which is realistically where MICAP Prime lives.
I can see it.
No, go ahead. I was
going to say, I see your thoughts on the top of your,
The policy piece there is very important, especially what they captured. So I really appreciate how they captured it, because for many years, I started getting my master's degree at Abbott in 2012 and I graduated in 2014. But one of the primary topics that we discussed in a lot of the supply chain classes were differentiating effectiveness from efficiency. And sometimes I needed efficiency to win out, and sometimes I needed effectiveness to win out. But again, going back to the Air Force being an optimization problem, you needed both efficiency and effectiveness, right? The most effective way to ensure that parts are moving as quickly as they can would be, of course, to take that 15-pound package, set it in the back seat of a D model F-16 if you have F-16s, and fly it to wherever it needs to go, right? That's effective. We'll get it there. Not very efficient, right? Efficient from the use of the jet, or efficient from cost perspective, right? Or especially when comparing and contrasting. Well, I can send this package next business day delivery by FedEx for $37. It's going to take us thousands of dollars to generate that F-16 sortie to strap that thing into the back of the D model, right? And senior logistics, senior supply chain, senior sustainment leaders, that is at the forefront of what they have to do, is how are we effective and how are we efficient? And when we're willing from an AFI perspective to say that these critical assets should be sent with the cost of the shipment secondary, my own paraphrase right there, that's a huge thing. Because we have great transporters that are doing the calculation and stuff like that, and I'm like, man, that's a really expensive shipment right there, right? That to ship that next business day, that 148-pound package, I haven't looked at prices for a couple of years, so but that's $600-700, right? But we don't at the same time know that that's not a single hit on a jet, and the maintenance crews are waiting for that part, and they're parts plus 6 hours or something like that. And oh, by the way, that jet is supposed to deploy at the end of the week, right? We can't afford to put that. We can't afford to put that on the back of the truck and drive it from MacDill to Fairchild if it's a KC-135 part, right? So by saying that, what we're saying is we're starting to recognize the value of the asset, i.e. the resource, the jet, relative to the value of that individual shipment, right? Some of these are very small fleets. And the value of getting that jet fixed, the part into the hands of the maintainers, far outweighs from both a dollars to cents and an intellectual perspective that cost of shipment.
So when we think about, how do you think this AFI empowers airmen to make different decisions when it comes to 1-alpha MICAPs? And what does MICAP Prime in its current state mean for TMO troops and supply troops across CONUS right now?
As a squadron commander of an LRS that has a massive material management and TMO footprint, I can't hire material managers or TMO troops, and I'm having a hard time retaining them because their services and their skill set is being significantly valued by industry partners and industry in general. Defense contractors are paying well for the experience of material managers and TMO troops. So our troops are being shown that industry very much values their skill set because it adds to the bottom line. A lot easier to save $1 in logistics than it is it's a lot easier to save $1 in logistics than it is to sell 10 more widgets at 10 cents each, right? So when we have policy like this, we're starting to show, even to our own troops, we're starting to show that what you do impacts our operational capability. We can't let these boxes just be boxes. It's not just a box. It's a critical spare that is going to go fill a hole on a jet at another base across the United States. And that maintenance team and that ops group commander and that operational squadron commander is waiting for that jet to green up so they can do something else. And if it's just a box, okay, it'll get there when it gets there. That's not a mindset, right? Because somebody's waiting for that. If with what that policy is saying is like, this is a critical asset. We're telling you it's a critical asset. We're telling you to lean into and create speed. Well, the material managers who pull the part off the shelf and the TMO troops who generate the shipment, we're telling them that you have an operational impact. And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. And I think when we look at the current state, like, I understand it is a step forward, and we're looking at it as, whether it's one step forward, whether someone looks at it as, 10 steps forward or 100 steps forward, knowing how hard it is to change policy in the Air Force. I'm looking forward to, the potential future state. Thinking about the maybe not to zip too far ahead, but I also want to, think about the other solutions that were encompassed initially in the MICAP Prime idea, in project and in Pathfinder, right?
Yeah.
We talked about pull, pack, and ship metrics.
Yeah.
We've talked about like integrating a material solution, into the system, which is not out of the question right now. That's something that has been scoped and agreed upon to execute. It's just a matter of doing it. But what do you tangibly envision for the future of MICAP Prime, for LROs and TMO troops and supply troops to think about as they continue to send their demand signal up for what the future can be, and like what is possible, and what are actually, maybe this is a two-parter, and then what are other ideas that frontline airmen are more than capable of accomplishing to supplement MICAP Prime moving forward?
One thing that's important to me that I want to say is, in any initiative like MICAP Prime, you have to start somewhere, right? And I had a host of additional things that I wanted to do, everything from the sourcing logic to the ones and zeros that the troops see when they look at a screen, how CMOS and how ILSS interfaces, you name it. All that stuff is still there, and is still a desire that I want to keep pushing on. Let me share an analogy with you, because I think this is relevant. One of my favorite movies is The Shawshank Redemption. Okay, and Andy Dufresne wants to start a library. I want to start a library. So he's talking to the warden. He's got a relationship with the warden by this point. He's got a relationship with the guards, and he's bringing his special skill set to bear. And he tells the warden, I want to start a library. I'm gonna email the people in the government and ask them to send me some funds to start a library. And the governor says, basically, they're not going to listen to you. But if you want to send your letters, I'll send them for you. So Andy starts sending a letter a week, right? Letter a week. In the movie they show him checking in, and there's no response. And then one day out of the blue, he gets called up into the office or whatever it is, and there's just all this stuff everywhere. There's a letter for boxes and boxes of books and a record player and some records, if you're familiar with the movie. And the letter says essentially, like, we got all your letters. Here's $250 and a bunch of books, and we consider this case closed now, right? Stop sending us letters. And he kind of steps back and he looks for a second and he goes, wow, I guess I'm going to have to send him 2 letters a week now, right? And I really see we just affected policy with a chart that I created because I couldn't answer questions intelligently. I created a chart based on actual MICAP data in 2017. And now in 2022, we've updated a couple paragraphs in an AFI. I almost feel a little bit like Andy Dufresne. It's like, okay, if we can get this started and we can dent the universe, now I need to push just a little bit harder, right? Because I know that there's still so much out there that we can do to impact, creating speed with just these handful of critical, resources, right? You asked about what are some of the other things that you want to do. I would like to have a critical pull time created in ILSS based on what we know to be the approximate time that the carrier departs the base from a day, whether that's 10:30 in the morning or that's 1600 at night, right? If we know that carrier leaves at 10:30, then if it's past that, or there's an option to go someplace else and create a next business day delivery, well, we're not going to source to the base that's already past that critical pull time, because it decreases our probability of next business day, right? Or the material management troop looks at the screen and says, if I hit the go button right now to order this part, we're not going to get it until Friday, this Tuesday afternoon. I can tell you right now, we're not going to get this part. Well, then, that material manager can go back to the his or her maintenance counterparts and say, Friday, and then maybe we reconsider what we're doing with cans or something, right? Or we engage the scow on a break glass scenario and say, we looked, Friday is not going to work. Here's the reason why Friday is not going to work. We're asking you to break glass and get us this part. All that meat is out there hanging on the bone, right? Now we just have to push harder and advocate stronger and go back to what we did on that blue line train and say, here's the idea, here's the cost, here's how it would work, here's the goodness, here's what we have to give up, here's what we have to reprioritize, here's what the contractor said would take, how long it would take to code that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then from a commander's perspective, I'm not the clearinghouse of good ideas, right? I've started to detach, and as much as that pains me to say it, but it goes back to something that I'm kind of fond of saying is, if you set low expectation for your troops, don't be surprised when they meet them. But the same is also true when you set high expectations for your troops. And then you say, I want you to push on this. I want you to be comfortable in the red, as General Litchfield said, when he started Art of the Possible back in 2012 or 2013 or something like that. It's like, we're going to set some really hard goals, which means that we're going to be in the red, but we should aspire to those really hard goals. And then if we meet those goals, then we should set other really hard goals, and we should aspire to meet those. I had a conversation with my material management flight commander, Lieutenant Bruce, phenomenally intelligent young man. And we were talking about how do we do MICAP Prime in the 355th LRS. And he produced some really good stuff. He's a petroleum engineer, chemical engineer. He's big brain. And he produced some really good charts. And I said, man, these are really good. But I think we're looking at it a little bit different. We had a really good conversation. And he left my office and he's like, I've been looking at this incorrectly. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at this, with a different perspective now. And that's all he needed. Right now, he's balancing being a flight commander to the Air Force's second largest material management flight, but I know that he's still gonculating on how do we get after some of that. How do we push on this really, really hard? Because MICAP Prime and many other the other projects that Tesseract does is not an overnight thing, right? It's going to take a long time to to create the change and drive the change and answer the second and third order questions. It's going to take a long time. You're not going to do that overnight. You know what I'm saying? But where the troops see an opportunity to create speed, whether that's the documented cargo troops and TMO and ground transportation, not confining themselves to individual sweeps, right, to deliver parts, but when they communicate with their maintenance and their material management peers, they say, hey, this entire squadron is waiting on this part right here. So when it hits, can you either generate a specific trip out to deliver it, or let us know and we'll generate a specific trip over to you to get that? That's like, sometimes the stuff that we think is trivial, i.e. good communication, good conversation, being on the same page is what we need to create speed, both internally and externally. I had a unique opportunity to have an office call with General Thomas, who was the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps before I left DC. Met him and his wife randomly sitting in church, and I saw him enough times, and he asked me how I was doing. I told him I was going to go take command of the squadron. He invited me up for an office call. As it relates to ideas, he gave me one of the best pieces of leadership advice. He said, as a commander, you have to be easy to please, but difficult to satisfy. And I've hung on to that for a long time. And is that when people bring you their ideas on how to do X, Y, or Z, you appreciate very much the idea, but then you challenge them to go back and flesh out their idea and think about those second and third order things. And while you're challenging them, you're also appreciating the fact that they're probably getting outside of maybe just their one specific job and thinking about, denting their universe just a little bit. So I don't know that I did a service to your question, your two-part question there. So I yield to you for follow-ups or redirects on that one.
No, that was great, Chip. ILSS has the new-ish notification system, right?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Do you want to? I know that's not the end all here, but it is also one of those steps in the right direction where someone else can now start writing their 2 letters a week in. But do you want to explain that to our audience?
Yeah. And I'll say the squeaks and beeps, right? But what that does is just, hey, a high priority requisition has hit your base, and here's a notification, so you're alerted about that, right? So we don't want important requisitions to be missed. We want that flash to go off to as many people as possible, right? So it's not, if the one person whose job it is to stare at ILSS to wait for that next requisition to hit that we have to pull. Well, if he gets called away for something, well, who's watching the storefront here?
Yeah.
And we miss an opportunity to create speed, and we just bought an extra. If this happens on Thursday or Friday, we just bought another 48 hours on that requisition.
Mm-hmm.
No, we as many eyes and as many hands contributing as possible. And I appreciate Chris Ford's work on driving that solution. You couldn't ask for a better guy to be in the boat rowing with you than Chris, and working, many hours trying to just get stuff like that codified and pushed out to where it becomes a common thing, not like just special knowledge because you moused around and you stumbled upon something. But here, this is something that you can do to help improve the service that you're providing to your buddy at a different base.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree. He's a good dude. in the tests and all of the work that was done to conceptualize and bring about MICAP Prime,
Yeah.
there was a 20% uh, increase in speed of
Yeah.
MICAPs. So
Yeah.
there was the average MICAP took or takes 70 hours,
Yeah.
and MICAP Prime was able to bring that down to 50. As
Right.
as we talk about speed and maintaining tempo in our operation, how long do you think it's going to take for us to reach that 20% increase in speed average? So, like, at what point, now that this AFI is in place, do you think we're going to be able to bring down the average MICAP down to 50 hours in the foreseeable future? Or do you think that material solution is going to be necessary in order to supplement the um, the speed and tempo of MICAPs?
So I understand well that kind of like an experiment bias occurs, right? You have a hypothesis and you say, hey, units, you're helping me test this hypothesis, and this is what we want you to do, right? Um, and if they do that, what you have laid out before them, you should, in theory, if your hypothesis is true, you should achieve those results. Like, if we do these things, my cap part should go faster, and that's what we saw, right? But Garrett Major Hernandez he might be a lieutenant colonel now.
He's a select,
Yeah, he's
just like you.
oh, yeah,
Gave you guys
smart
both a
too.
call on the same day.
um, but Garrett was always fond of saying, and I think it's absolutely true, that while there are a lot of policy issues and things that we can do from a technological perspective to facilitate MICAP Prime, MICAP Prime was a behavioral problem. It was we have the intelligence out there to create a phenomenal amount of speed for anything that we ship, whether that's 2x4s to do a CE project, or concrete, or food, or whatever. We have the mental capacity to be able to come up with a solution and implement it. It's repeating it over and over and over and over and over again. Right? I was fond of saying that every MICAP is a unique and delicate flower, just like every other MICAP. Right? So while the origin destination, yada yada yada, for each MICAP is largely unique, you can pull very broad and overarching lessons learned and rule sets and everything like that, commonalities, when you look at them in the aggregate, right? So if we can get our material managers and TMO troops, our transporters, to, as soon as they get the notification, to run over and pull that thing out, have it inspected if it needs to be inspected, or just get it over to TMO as quickly as if we can create those that immediate response by behavior, like, this is just what we do for this thing, then yeah, we can create a lot of speed, right? When I was talking MICAP Prime initially, I was met with, we already do that. The kind of common refrain was, we already do all that. We immediately pull them off the shelf, and we immediately send them over here to inspection, or we immediately give it over to TMO, and if it's already packed, we got it. And we get those things moving. And then when you pull the data, something didn't jive, right? Because if we did all those things, if we already did all those things, this line right here would be way over to the left. But it was never way over to the left. It was always way over to the right, which was, there was a disconnect somewhere, right? So going back to the experiment, it was everybody's singing off the same sheet of music, and everybody's marching to the same drummer, and we're doing all these things. Well, then, wow, we did get faster. We didn't queue MICAPs up until 11:30 and pull them all at once and then take them over. And we did, we rushed to get them off the shelf if we knew the carrier was getting ready to leave. So we moved with urgency that maybe was not common across the enterprise. And I'm not throwing stones at material managers or TMI. Everybody's busy. But we put a special emphasis during this experiment to elevate even further the criticality of moving these requisitions. And we did show that we could create speed. We lopped off a lot of hours, and that was pretty awesome. I learned, and we learned very quickly on that the next business day piece of the actual shipping priority that we moved MICAPs with was the easiest thing that we could do. Hey, N1A MICAPs ship with next business day. Oh, okay. Right? I mean, we had like a 96 or 97% compliance rate during our experiment, which, was up 10 or 11 percentage points. So there was goodness to be gained right there. Right. So we did improve on that, but we still had to get it into the hands of the TMO troop for them to generate that next business day shipment, right? And that requires it getting off the shelf and foregoing that we don't take parcels after this time if you had an internal rule set. And by and large, we set aside some of those things. That was in the instruction letter that we sent out for set aside those internal control mechanisms to generate speed as fast as possible. And if you're capable and you're so willing and you have the manpower and the resources to take apart at 1700 and drive 2 miles off base to the FedEx or the UPS terminal to get that thing into their hands, to get it moving, then by all means do that. That's a leadership win, right? Mm-hmm. But it was moving at the end of the day, going back to what Garrett always says, it was moving deliberately, right? From a human performance, not assuming that we already do this type perspective. And I think that's the critical thing, but it goes back to that optimization. Is you can't prioritize everything all the time. So that's why we talked about N1, grounding MICAPs were where we were going to start this test, and this rule set was the ones that we considered the most important. We'll start from there and then waterfall out from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, just simple Pareto principle, right? Like those, small amount of 1-alpha MICAPs are causing majority of the problems, right? Yeah. And there's no bigger problem in the Air Force than a jet that is grounded because of a part, right? Especially one that needs to be green for a mission, for deployment. And when we build those habits now in peacetime, they become second nature when things start getting a little bit more serious, right? And not saying that we can't rise to the occasion already, because I very much think that that our airmen and the Joint Force in general can rise to any occasion that it's put up against. However, we can continue to optimize the machine, right? As we've talked about, to be that much more ready and lethal when we need to be. Looks like you got that there.
Right. And even more so when right now the Air Force in no way, that's a Joint Force in any way, is zero capacity constraints in terms of moving stuff about the DoD enterprise. Nothing. There's zero capacity constraints. Like the balloon goes up, yeah, we're going to start to be capacity constrained, and we have to have thought about what is the most important. What is the thing that I absolutely have to move? And then because we've been thinking about that with programs like MICAP Prime and other stuff that is just now bubbling to the surface, where we're prioritizing this one over this one for whatever reason, we'll at least have an intellectual foundation for saying it's all important, but this one is critical, so this one goes.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And the
'Cause,
fact, oh, sorry.
no, because we're going to have to make those decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
The load decision is going to have to make those decisions, or the operator is going to have to make those decisions via his or her, servicing logistics commander.
And by default, because of this AFI change, you can have a little bit more of an intellectual conversation talking about, efficiency and effectiveness, and talking about, well, instead of it being the most, efficient price wise, well, now let's open up the dialogue here, sir or ma'am or sergeant or whoever it is, um, that this is the right decision for the Air Force. This is the right decision for the maintainer on the other end of this
Sure.
MICAP.
Right.
And this is ultimately the right decision for the mission and mission accomplishment.
Sure. I talked to hundreds of maintainers during my time in the Scout. I talked to my maintainer peers now, and that the commonality of their talking point, it hasn't substantively changed. Is um, order our parts as quickly as we can. Use stateside parts to satisfy stateside MICAPs, and that gets back to the positioning parts in far off lands, if you will, and the difficulty to get them there. So why pull them first, right? And I always perceived, and this was what my squadron commander in the Scout, Lieutenant Colonel Dan Hervis, now retired, always said is, if they can perceive that you're doing what you're telling them that you are doing for them, like, and they perceive it and they believe it, that goes a long way, right? Because when he engaged the 436 Supply Chain Operations Squadron, he says, "It's beautiful in here, isn't it? It's 71 degrees year round, and you're sitting here ordering parts, and there's some young maintenance troop that's frying on a hot fight line. There's some young maintenance troop that's freezing on a cold fight line, waiting for the parts that you order, right? So the least that we can do for that frying troop or that freezing troop is to move with haste and expediency to get them the stuff that they need, right? And I've never really forgot that. And that was a bit of the impetus for MICAP Prime as a it's thinking about the troop that just needs to fix the jet. But yeah, whether individually or from an enterprise perspective, we can move with speed as a collective, or we can move with speed as individual, and that will never not be beneficial to what we're trying to do as a logistics enterprise, right? There's always goodness to that.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, there are going to be those exceptions, right? There are going to be some bases where parts are harder to get than others, from depending on the MDS. But thinking on the aggregate, the point, I guess the overarching message here is airmen are more empowered to make decisions based off of this AFI change.
Heck yeah.
And I think that's the number one, takeaway.
Oh,
and two, collectively, we can still generate speed, regardless of those one-offs. Like, I know, I got, friends that have worked on, CV-22s, and like, hey, we have certainly some part constraints. I was recently, talking to a friend of mine that works on, he's an LRO at Dias, and he's talking about his parts coming in for the B1s, and they have their challenges too. But all of that aside, proud of the fact that we have allowed airmen to make a decision that they believe is most efficient and effective for the force, and not letting a bureaucratic system say what is most efficient is the only answer. And I think that's a really, really big win.
If you can affect policy, that's a massive win. right? But if you can affect policy, you can also affect computer coding. And you can, like, so now, like Andy Dufresne, it's time to start writing 2 letters a week, right?
I was about to say.
Now I have my $250 and a host of books for my library, right? You've given me the policy basis to do what I want to do from a system perspective. Now I'm going to run with, I have it in policy that we should do this. Like, here's my intellectual basis. I'm going to use that to keep pushing that much harder to improve ILSS, to pursue, improve the interface between ILSS and CMOS, to let ILSS generate the shipping parameters, right? All the stuff, improve sourcing logic. Yeah, absolutely. 2 letters a week. I should hashtag that and put it on a bumper sticker or something like that.
Next year OSU one.
Do the cool kids still do hashtags, or have we moved on to something else? I don't.
Hashtags. We @ things. I don't know what Gen Z's up to, but
at 2 letters a week. There we go.
So, Chip, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. The very first Tesseract Pathfinder, the first big win with our first Pathfinder,
right.
And super proud of you, proud of MICAP Prime and everyone that's made it possible. And I appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy. I'm proud of you too. Like, I'm excited for your future.
Thank you again for listening to Tesseract Podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and connect with us on LinkedIn. Any references to trademarked, copyrighted, or protected products or services such as books, movies, or businesses are used here for the limited purpose of education and professional development of Air Force Airmen. If you have any questions, please contact us at www.tesseract.af.mil.